Sophia warned John not to come to her wedding. She didn't want drama, she didn't want guilt, she didn't want her past showing up in front of the cameras while she smiled at Ryan and vowed her forever. She texted it the night before the ceremony, just after midnight. It read, "Don't come tomorrow, I mean it, don't ruin what I have left." There was no greeting, no signature, just an assumption that John would understand, obey, and disappear, like always. And he did. At 2:00 p.m. the next day, the wedding venue glittered with blush peach drapes and baby pink roses. Ryan looked perfect. The guests looked amused, the air was rich with curated romance. Sophia had practiced her smile in the mirror for weeks, rehearsed every pause and blink for the cameras, every carefully timed gaze toward Ryan. She was going to erase everything John had been, quiet, simple, underwhelming, and replace it with this, glossy, elevated, enviable. What she didn't know was that the message she sent hadn't been seen by John. At 3:07 p.m., just after Sophia walked down the aisle, a notification pinged across several group chats. It was an image, a simple one, just a dinner receipt, dated 3 months earlier, showing Sophia's name and Ryan's signature on the same tab, while she was still legally married to John. The caption under it was gentle. It didn't scream betrayal, it didn't name names, it simply read, "Some people say yes, long before they end the last goodbye." At first, no one cared, a few phones buzzed, a few glances shifted, but then came the next upload, a series of photos, private ones, Sophia with Ryan, Sophia with John, and one particularly damning one, Sophia holding Ryan's hand in the backseat of a car while replying, "Love you too," to a message from John. Whispers turned to silence, the officiant paused, Ryan's smile faltered. Sophia's heart pounded, her veil felt too tight. She heard it, the cough, the shuffle, the stiffening in the crowd. She turned, barely blinking behind the soft lace covering her eyes. A woman in a muted lavender dress stood at the edge of the gathering. She didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. She wasn't familiar to most, but Sophia knew. She recognized the calm gaze, the small hands, the quiet stillness. It was Deborah. She had always been around in the background, hadn't she? Quiet, soft-spoken. Just a friend. The one Sophia never saw as a threat. And now she was the one holding John's old phone. Sophia's blood ran cold. The leak wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was methodical, timed, measured. One upload every 5 minutes, as if someone wanted the wedding to rot slowly. Guests were murmuring now. Some laughed awkwardly, a few raised their phones, recording discreetly. The officiant whispered to Ryan. Ryan looked down at Sophia with furrowed brows. "What's going on?" he asked. "I don't know," she replied, but she did, and her fingers trembled. The text she sent to John wasn't meant to end anything, it was a performance, a cruel little warning. She wanted him to feel small, she wanted him to understand that he was being replaced and that no one would mourn his absence. But now, in the middle of her perfect wedding, her absence of him had become the loudest thing in the room. Ryan stepped back slightly. "You didn't tell me someone might sabotage this." "I didn't know," she hissed. "Really?" The officiant cleared his throat. "Shall we pause the ceremony?" "No," Sophia snapped too quickly. But it was too late, the spell was broken. More photos, more captions, all timed, all posted from the same account, with a name no one recognized but Sophia did, still holding the bouquet. And then came the final blow. A video clip, 20 seconds, a hospital hallway, John in a wheelchair, breathing heavily, Deborah kneeling beside him, phone in hand, his voice, barely a whisper. "If she doesn't want me there, don't send anything, just, don't reply." Deborah's voice. "Okay, I won't, I'll be there instead." He never saw the wedding. He never saw her bouquet. But now, everyone else did. And Sophia? She froze at the altar, lips parted mid-sentence, bouquet still clutched in her trembling hands. She had warned him not to come, and he hadn't. But the truth had come anyway. And when it reached her, when the reality of what she'd done unfolded, not just to John, but to Deborah, to Ryan, to herself, there were no screams, no fights, no chaos. Only one thought rang in her head, loud as church bells. He didn't ruin my wedding, he just walked out of it before I ever arrived. And now, long after the guests had left, after Ryan stopped returning her calls, after the live stream was deleted from every platform it once trended on, Sophia still held the same bouquet in a vase by her window. Dry, colorless, fragile, just like the apology she never got to give, because John had left, quietly, but his silence still echoed in every room she entered, and Deborah never posted another photo, never said a word, never needed to. She had been the last person John spoke to, and Sophia had been the last person he forgave by not replying. John had always been quiet. Not in the way that made people uncomfortable, not brooding or cold, but quietly present. He listened more than he spoke. He remembered little things people forgot they'd said. When Sophia's mother was hospitalized 3 years ago, it was John who sent soup without being asked, who picked her up from the clinic even when Sophia never told him the time. When her friends forgot her birthday, John filled her room with pink lilies and handwrote a letter on warm cream stationery, listing 30 things he admired about her. Sophia had smiled at the time, but even then, she called it too much, said it made her feel guilty, said John didn't need to love that hard, but John didn't know how to love any other way. He never fought back when Sophia teased him in front of friends. When she compared him to other men, bolder, louder, richer, John only looked away. And when she told him he was too predictable, too quiet, too background, he apologized like it was a flaw he was supposed to fix. Deborah saw it, of course, always from the corner of the room, always with a soft frown and silent concern behind her glasses. She was the kind of woman people overlooked, gentle, observant, and always one step out of the spotlight. Sophia called her the Notetaker, a nickname that stuck. Even when John and Sophia hosted dinner parties, Deborah was the one clearing plates while Sophia posed for photos. She never complained. Just listened, quietly. Especially to John. The truth was, John and Deborah had never been close, not in the way that would raise questions, but they shared a rhythm, a way of recognizing sadness in others without asking for it to be explained. John helped Deborah build a bookshelf once. She brought soup when he was sick with the flu. It was nothing, really, nothing Sophia ever noticed, or if she did, she didn't care. Then Ryan reappeared. He had been Sophia's what if in college. He guy who turned heads when he laughed too loud or climbed on stage at open mics. He had charm, money, and that flash of danger Sophia had always craved. When he moved back to the city, Sophia bumped into him at a gallery opening. She said it was fate, said it felt like no time had passed. John wasn't invited to that event. 2 weeks later, Sophia asked John if he thought people grew out of each other. He said yes, carefully. He always answered carefully. She smiled and said, maybe they had. John didn't argue. He signed the divorce papers in a plain office without a lawyer present. He said he didn't want alimony, didn't want the apartment, didn't want anything but time. Sophia blinked, confused. Nothing? She asked. He shook his head. Nothing left to say. It was the most final sentence he'd ever spoken. He moved out 2 days later, left the keys on the table, the bookshelf still standing, the birthday letters in the bottom drawer untouched. Sophia stood in the empty hallway for 5 minutes after he left, waiting to feel relief. What she felt instead was nothing. And that too, she blamed on John. But John didn't vanish into despair. He simply folded his past into silence and handed his phone to someone he trusted. Deborah. I won't be needing it anymore, he said. But there are things on here, messages, numbers, photos. Some of them matter to people more than they matter to me. If anything ever comes up, I want you to have it. You'll know what to do. Deborah didn't ask questions. She never did. Sophia never noticed. She was too busy perfecting her new life, Instagram stories of dinners with Ryan, second chances hashtags, awkward inside jokes captioned with, he makes me laugh like nobody else. She pretended she'd erased John, but she still scrolled through his old photos once a week, not out of love, out of ego, to make sure he hadn't moved on. He hadn't posted since the divorce. No photos, no statuses, no trace. Eventually, she stopped checking. And that's when the text was sent. It was the night before the wedding. Ryan was asleep beside her, snoring softly after a long night of drinks and rehearsals. Sophia sat by the window in a blush peach robe, hair wrapped in rollers, typing one last message to a man she thought still cared. Don't come tomorrow, I mean it, don't ruin what I have left. She didn't sign it, didn't add context. She wanted to hurt him, just a little, not enough to draw blood, just enough to remind him he was the chapter before the real story started. She sent it at 12:01 a.m., and at that moment, Deborah was sitting beside John's hospital bed. The illness had come fast, a complication he hadn't disclosed to anyone except Deborah, something genetic, something old. He hadn't wanted treatment at first, said he didn't want pity, but Deborah didn't let him fade quietly. She organized his appointments, brought his books, set up a blog for him to write when he had the strength. Most of the time, he just rested. Listening to the rain, watching the soft lavender, or light through the blinds. When Sophia's message appeared, Deborah read it twice. Then she looked at John. He was awake, barely. "She texted you," Deborah said softly. John didn't reach for the phone. "She's getting married," she added. John closed his eyes. "If you want to say something, I can type it for you." He shook his head. "No?" He exhaled slowly, then, without opening his eyes, he said, "If she doesn't want me there, don't send anything." Deborah nodded. "I won't." John paused. "But be there, for me." "I will." She held his hand the rest of the night. Sophia never received a reply. She thought it meant she'd won. Deborah kept the phone locked away until the morning of the wedding. She watched the live stream from the hospital cafe, headphones in, expression unreadable. She saw Sophia smile, saw Ryan holding her hand, saw the guests clapping. And then, at 3:07 p.m., she opened the photo folder. Not out of malice, not for attention, but because John had always told the truth without raising his voice, and she would honor that. She uploaded one photo, just one. And everything began to fall. The sun rose soft and pale over the city skyline, dusting the tall cathedral windows with a blush pink glow. It was the kind of morning brides prayed for: clear skies, soft winds, and perfect lighting for every carefully curated photograph. Sophia stood before the mirror in a silk gown the color of ivory cream, her hair curled and pinned just right. The makeup artist whispered affirmations as she added final touches. "You're glowing. He won't take his eyes off you. This is your moment." Sophia smiled. It was all going according to plan. Downstairs, florists rushed between tables with muted rose arrangements. Guests filtered into pews, dressed in pale lavender and warm beiges per the invitation's dress code. A string quartet played low in the background, tuning up for the aisle walk. Every detail had been rehearsed, budgeted, optimized. Sophia had chosen perfection, and she was standing in the center of it. She didn't know that 25 minutes earlier, an anonymous Instagram account had uploaded a carousel of photos, private photos. Ones she hadn't seen in over a year, some with her and Ryan, time-stamped months before her divorce, some with John, smiling softly beside her while her fingers hovered just off his. The captions were short, no accusations, just facts, dates, locations, receipts. The kind you can't explain away. It hadn't exploded immediately, the account was new. A few people saw it, whispered about it, but weren't sure what they were seeing, until the live stream began. The wedding was being broadcast to family overseas and followers who had watched Sophia's relationship with Ryan unfold in staged reels and soft focus highlights. Over 200 people tuned in as the music began and Ryan walked up to the altar. He looked confident, polished, unaware. Sophia's entrance followed a few beats later. Her smile was steady, bouquet gripped lightly, but as she stepped through the doors, a ping echoed from someone's phone in the front row, then another, a pause in the music, a ripple of motion. Her steps faltered by a fraction. In the back pew, Deborah sat quietly, dressed in a soft, dusty mauve dress, hair tied back, hands folded neatly in her lap. She wasn't recording, she wasn't smiling, she simply watched. The officiant began speaking. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered," but the live stream froze. A new video had gone live on the same anonymous account, this time, no photo, just a screen recording of Sophia's messages to both men, some written late at night, time-stamped when she claimed to be with friends, others written on the very day her divorce was finalized. One message to John: "Please don't stop caring, I just need time." And one to Ryan, sent 2 hours later: "It's done, he won't bother us anymore." The audience didn't gasp, they quieted, the kind of silence that hits when something is wrong, but no one knows what to say. Ryan turned toward Sophia with a tight smile, whispering through his teeth. Is this part of your media rollout? She blinked. What? He stepped closer. People are sharing something, on their phones, during the vows. Sophia turned her head and saw it, guests scrolling through identical posts, heads bowed, eyes wide. Her stomach flipped. The officiant paused. Shall we continue? Ryan looked to her. Do you want to? Sophia nodded, too quickly. Yes. But the moment was gone. The next upload was worse. It was audio, faint, but unmistakable. Her voice, laughing, saying something about how guys like John don't fight, they just disappear. The background was a restaurant. Ryan could be heard too, snorting. Yeah, poor guy's probably still waiting for closure. A new caption, he never got closure, but you did. The phone number listed on the account was obscured, except for the last 4 digits. Sophia's stomach dropped. She knew that number. It was John's. The room felt colder. Her bouquet felt heavier. Ryan's fingers tensed around hers. Sophia, he said quietly, is this a joke? She didn't answer. She turned and scanned the crowd, looking for a camera, a friend with a guilty face, anything. And then she saw her. Deborah, still seated, still calm. Sophia blinked. She hadn't seen Deborah in nearly a year, hadn't invited her, hadn't even remembered she existed until this moment. But there she was, watching, not recording, not reacting. Is that Deborah? Sophia whispered. Ryan followed her gaze. Who? Sophia didn't reply. Her mouth had gone dry. She remembered now how John always spoke gently of Deborah, how he once said, she notices things others don't. How she'd laughed at that. Called Deborah a wallflower. Told John he needed friends who challenged him, not ones who just sat there with soup and sympathy. Another ping. Another post. This one was different. A video, John in a hospital bed. His voice hoarse, barely audible. If she doesn't want me there, don't send anything. Just don't reply. Deborah's voice replied, soft and steady. Okay, I won't. I'll be there instead. Sophia's knees nearly buckled. The room spun. Ryan stared at her. You told him not to come. She swallowed. I didn't mean. You told him not to come, and then this happened? I didn't do this. No, he said, pulling his hand away. But you lit the match. The officiant stepped back. We can take a moment. Sophia shook her head. I can fix this. But Ryan wasn't listening anymore. He was already walking toward the side doors, jaw clenched, phone in hand. Deborah remained seated. She didn't smile, didn't stand, she simply watched. Sophia rushed down the aisle, heels clicking on the stone floor. Stop the stream, she shouted. Shut it down. One of the tech assistants shook his head. It's Aura, Eddie out there. We can't control the shares. She turned to Deborah. You're behind this. Deborah looked up. Why would you do this? You didn't even matter to him. Deborah's voice was calm. That's where you're wrong. I was the only one who did. At the end. Sophia's eyes burned. You think ruining my wedding makes you important? No, Deborah said. But telling the truth makes him remembered. Sophia stared at her for a long time. The walls around her wedding were collapsing. Ryan gone. Guests whispering, photos now trending with hashtags like #left at the altar and #bouquet of lies, and John. Nowhere. No longer reachable, no longer responsive. She opened her phone and tried to call him. The number was disconnected. She emailed. The message bounced. She searched for his blog. It was gone, and for the first time, Sophia realized what true silence felt like. Not rejection, not rage, just the absence of being considered anymore. Deborah stood and walked past her without another word. Sophia turned back to the altar, holding the bouquet tightly. But no one was watching anymore. No music played, no vows were heard. Just the faint echo of the last thing John ever said, recorded for the world to hear, but never directed at her. He didn't ruin her wedding, he just never showed up. And somehow, that was worse. The silence after the live stream cut was louder than any explosion. Sophia's heels clicked violently down the aisle as she spun to face the crowd, trembling hands still clutching the wilting bouquet. "Who did this?" she barked. Her voice cracked on the final word. "Who posted it?" No one answered. No one had to. The damage was done. The whispers swelled like wind in a glass cathedral. Ryan was gone. He hadn't said goodbye, just turned and walked out the side doors with his jaw locked tight and his phone already lighting up with messages. Sophia had shouted his name once, then again, but the second time, her voice shook too much and she knew it was over. Not just the wedding. Her grip on the narrative, on control, on reality, gone. She scanned the guests, now slowly rising from pews, murmuring to one another. Some still had the posts open, swiping, re-watching. Her mother's eyes were wide, her maid of honor looked frozen. The musicians had stopped playing completely. The entire event, months in the making, had collapsed in the span of 23 minutes, and Deborah was still seated. Back row, pale mauve dress, hair neat, no expression, just watching, like she always had. "You," Sophia pointed, voice raw. "Get up." Deborah did not move. Sophia stormed toward her, the bouquet now trembling in her fist. "Is this your revenge?" For what? For being invisible?" Still, Deborah didn't answer. She simply tilted her head slightly, as if examining a puzzle from the outside. "You never mattered," Sophia hissed. "You were a shadow." Deborah finally looked up. "And yet here we are. You're in pieces, and I'm still quiet." Sophia raised a hand, whether to point again or slap her, even she didn't know, but a security guard stepped in between them. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "we need to clear the venue, for your safety." Sophia laughed, a short, bitter sound. "My safety?" Her voice cracked again. She stepped back, then spun and ran down the aisle, toward the cathedral doors, out into the hot afternoon light, where cameras were already gathering. She ran. First to the car, then to her apartment, then to John's. She remembered the address. Hadn't been there in months, but she remembered. 4th floor, end unit, white door, soft bell chime when it opened. She pounded on it until her palms turned red. No answer. She tried the knob, locked, peered through the frosted glass, empty, echoing, cleared out, no furniture, no plants, not even dust. Gone. She rushed downstairs, cornered the landlord. "Where is he?" The man blinked. "Who?" "John, apartment 4B. He frowned. "That unit's been unlisted for months. No tenant by that name." She showed him a photo. He shrugged. "Never seen him." Liar. But it didn't matter. She tried his number next, disconnected. His email bounced. Social media, inactive, nothing new in over a year, no tags, no mentions. Like he'd scrubbed himself clean from her world. Sophia sat on the curb outside the building, still in her wedding dress, makeup running down her cheeks. She pulled up every chat she'd ever had with him. There weren't many. Just old texts, all one-sided. "Sophia. Why won't you talk?" "Sophia. Say something." "Sophia. Do you think I made the right choice?" "Sophia. I saw you at the bookstore. You looked happy. Was that Deborah?" "Sophia. Forget it." "Read." Never replied. She whispered his name like a curse. "John." No one answered. She went to his workplace next. It had once been a small photography studio, warm beige walls, soft jazz always playing in the background. But when she arrived, the windows were papered over. A for-lease sign hung crooked in the display. A new boutique was moving in. Sophia pressed her hands to the glass. Gone. Everything. She checked his last mailing address, old, redirected. She checked the phone bill, number recycled. She checked the original photo upload, the account had been deleted, traced back to a number that no longer existed, a name that wasn't attached to any ID. She called in favors with old friends, tried to pull data from the Livestream company. Nothing. Everything she touched now folded inward, like a stage collapsing after the curtains fell. And in every reflection, window, phone screen, car mirror, she saw herself, alone, holding a bouquet that no longer belonged to any moment. She tried Deborah next. The woman didn't block her, didn't hide. But when Sophia sent a message, "I need to talk, face to face," Deborah responded with a single line. "Deborah, John's gone." Sophia replied, "Gone where?" Deborah didn't answer. Sophia asked again, "Did he leave the country? Is he dead?" No reply. The silence wrapped around her throat. She tossed the phone across the room. It shattered, but the silence stayed. The tabloids feasted. Photos of her crying in the church aisle, mascara streaked, dress wrinkled. Runaway groom? No. Abandoned bride. Sophia's secrets leak mid-ceremony. Hashtag Silent John trends as wedding implodes. Ryan never returned her calls. His mother returned the gifts. Sophia locked herself in her apartment for 3 days before she re-emerged with sunglasses and excuses. Told the press they mutually agreed to take space, claimed it was a misunderstanding, but the damage was irreversible. What haunted her wasn't the cancellation, it was the lack of closure. John hadn't screamed, hadn't posted revenge threats, hadn't demanded justice. He had simply removed himself so thoroughly that even her rage had nowhere to land. He'd made himself untraceable, unreachable, untouchable. And in his place? The silence he left was louder than any revenge. Sophia started seeing Deborah in dreams, not speaking, not blaming, just standing beside John at the edge of a hospital bed, Deborah holding his hand, John barely awake. The image burned in her mind, someone else being there when she wasn't, someone else receiving his final moments, his last words. The last message she sent him before the wedding echoed over and over. "Don't come tomorrow, don't ruin it." But he never did. He simply handed the ruin to someone who never asked for revenge and quietly disappeared. And Sophia? She was left screaming into silence, alone, bouquet still in hand, and not a soul looking back. The headlines came first. Groom Ryan Blake claims he was misled by bride Sophia Hayes. Ex-groom speaks out, "I didn't know about the double life." Hashtag just left, holding the bouquet hits 12 million views. Sophia barely blinked at the news. She had expected Ryan to save himself. He was polished, PR trained. His statement came with a perfect mix of remorse and distance. "I too was unaware of certain dynamics. My heart goes out to all affected. I ask for privacy moving forward." He never mentioned her by name. That wasn't what broke her. It was a photo. One she hadn't seen before, not from the wedding, not from her social feed. This one was quiet, grainy, but heartbreakingly clear. Deborah sitting beside a hospital bed, one hand gently wrapped around John's. His skin was pale, tubes at his nose, eyes closed, heart monitor glowing in the background. Deborah's face soft, no tears, no theatrics, just presence. The caption beneath it was anonymous. He didn't need crowds, he needed one person who actually stayed. Sophia stared at it for 20 minutes before realizing the date in the corner, same night she sent that final message. "Don't come to the wedding, don't ruin it." She had sent it from the comfort of a 5-star hotel suite, surrounded by stylists, drinking champagne, practicing her vows in a mirror. He had been lying in a hospital bed, waiting. And she hadn't known. Or maybe, deep down, she hadn't cared enough to ask. Sophia stood in her living room, the bouquet from the wedding now dry and crumbling in a vase no one had touched. She reached for her phone again. No new messages, no returned calls. She searched John plus hospital and found nothing. No obituary, no news report, no confirmation, only that photo, and the ache it lit inside her. She paced for hours, unable to shake it. She scrolled through every photo Deborah had ever posted, every tagged memory, every shared reel. None showed John, only that one moment, the one she was never a part of. And that was when it struck her. She hadn't just lost John, she had ignored his last reach. Whatever little strength he had left, whatever final need he'd been too proud to say aloud, she'd silenced it. With 7 words. "Don't come to the wedding, don't ruin it." She thought back to their last real conversation, months before the divorce. He had asked if she was sure, told her he didn't mind staying quiet, that some things were worth working through. She had laughed in his face. "John," she'd said, "you don't make a sound, you just stand there and wait for life to decide for you. I can't be with someone who fades." He hadn't replied, but now she realized, he didn't fade. He just refused to beg. She opened her messages again and found his last sent text. It had been on the day she filed for divorce. John. Understood. I hope it all works out. No bitterness, no desperation, just goodbye, disguised as grace. She sat down hard on the edge of her bed and buried her face in her hands. The walls felt smaller, the lights too harsh. She had spent months telling herself she was right to leave, that silence wasn't love, that dullness wasn't devotion, but now, she saw it for what it was: steadiness, loyalty, patience, and she had traded it for drama, for spotlight, for someone like Ryan, louder, brighter, emptier. She called Deborah. It rang once, then stopped, blocked, no, sent straight to voicemail. She tried again, texted, Sophia, please, I saw the photo, I didn't know. No response. Sophia, was he dying? Is he gone? No response. Sophia, I didn't mean it. I didn't know he was in the hospital that night. I was trying to protect my new life. I thought he'd move on. Still nothing. She threw the phone onto the bed. She tried searching hospitals, called 3 in the city. I'm trying to reach a patient, John Archer. They all gave the same response. We can't release that information without authorization. She knew what that meant. He wasn't a patient anymore. Either discharged, or something worse. Her next search was public records. Nothing. No death certificate, no forwarding address, no lease in his name, nothing. He had vanished not in rage, but in relief. Because even at the edge of his life, he had wanted her to decide, and she had chosen her image. Sophia sat there for hours, scrolling through old conversations, watching her own typing bubbles over and over. I just need space. I feel stuck. Ryan makes me feel alive. Every word now sounded like a knife, not at him, at herself. She opened her drafts and tried writing an apology. John, I didn't know you were sick. Delete. I shouldn't have sent that message. Delete. You deserved better, and I hope you're okay. Delete. What could she possibly say? He wasn't listening anymore. She texted Deborah again. Sophia. Was that his goodbye? Did he tell you to show me that photo? This time, Deborah replied. Deborah. No, he told me to forget him, but I thought you deserved to remember. Sophia stared at the screen, then typed, Sophia. He always said you noticed things no one else did. Deborah. He said you only noticed things once they were gone. Sophia didn't reply. She closed the phone, walked to her closet, pulled down the white dress still hanging on its luxury hanger, the one she never wore again. She held it close, pressed her cheek to the silk, then dropped it into the donation box beside the door. She couldn't keep pretending it had meant anything anymore. Her wedding had been a photo op. But John had been her quiet truth. And the day she shut that door, she hadn't walked away from a man, she had walked away from the one person who had stayed even when it hurt. And worse? When he finally needed her, she told him not to come. The blog was never meant to go viral. It had no flashy banner, no hashtags, no cross posts. Just a muted page with a pale beige background, a single image of an empty bench beneath a tree, and an archive of weekly entries, each titled with the day of the week and nothing more. Thursday. Monday. Saturday. Sophia found it by accident, or so she told herself. In truth, she had searched for traces of John almost nightly, unable to stop. Google searches, comment threads, image boards. She'd seen his name mentioned only once, in a long Reddit thread titled, People Who Walked Away Without Revenge, What Happened Next? A user had commented, I knew someone who never spoke up even when he was wronged, he just left, but someone close to him writes about him every week, you can tell he mattered. The link led to the blog. The first post was dated a month after the wedding imploded. Sophia read it 3 times. Wednesday. Today. I folded a blanket he used to keep in his car. It still smelled like vanilla and winter air. He never raised his voice. He just waited for people to hear what silence sounds like. Most never did. Sophia closed the tab. Then reopened it 15 minutes later. She read every post. Some were about John, some were about loss, but none ever named her, not once. There was no blame, no accusation, just soft, relentless reminders of presence, absence, and the kind of love that didn't ask for recognition. Every Saturday, Deborah uploaded a new entry. They were simple. Saturday. It's strange how absence becomes a kind of furniture. You start walking around it without noticing. Then one day, you trip and realize you never really adjusted. You just pretended you had. Sunday. He had a habit of pausing before he answered, not because he was unsure, but because he wanted to make sure what he said didn't cause harm. The world didn't deserve that kind of care. Sophia stopped checking every day, but she never stopped reading. Each post was like a quiet mirror she hadn't asked for, and each week, the comment section grew. Thank you for writing this. I never knew him, but I miss him too. He sounds like the kind of man this world doesn't build anymore. He made silence feel safe. She read hundreds, never commented, but every word felt like a bruise under skin she couldn't shed. She thought about deleting the wedding photos from her cloud, but couldn't, not because she still believed in them, but because the dress, the altar, the aisle, all of it was a monument to misunderstanding, a frozen record of how far she had strayed from the truth. Ryan had vanished, his number changed, his team issued one final email. All inquiries regarding the wedding should be directed to Ms. Hayes's press agent. Mr. Blake will not be commenting further. Which meant she was the one left holding the bouquet, literally. It still sat in her apartment, dried and curled at the edges, the stems flaking, a relic. She couldn't throw it away. She didn't know how to explain that to anyone. It wasn't just guilt, it was grief. Not for a marriage that failed, but for a man who never asked her to change, only to notice. And she never had. Now, all she had was this ghost trail Deborah left behind. Each blog post was like a confession to the quiet. But it wasn't cruel. Deborah never gloated, never hinted, never even mentioned the wedding or the scandal or Sophia's name. It was as if the blog was meant for John, and Sophia was just an intruder in a place she no longer had any right to visit. One Saturday post stood out. Saturday. He asked me once why I stayed silent. I told him some truths don't survive noise. You have to whisper them into stillness and hope someone hears. He smiled and said, maybe one day she will. I think he was wrong, but he never stopped hoping. Sophia didn't sleep that night. She stared at her ceiling and thought about all the moments she had dismissed him, at dinners, at events, in conversations when he would pause just a second too long and she would cut him off with an impatient sigh. He wasn't slow. He was thoughtful. She had just never been patient enough to let him finish. She wondered what he had meant to say when he paused that final time before signing the divorce papers. He'd looked up, met her eyes, inhaled. She'd turned away. He never said the sentence, and she would never hear it. She opened the blog again. This time, she did something different. She emailed the contact address. Subject: I read every post. Message: I was part of the noise. I didn't understand what he meant until it was too late. You don't have to reply. I just wanted someone to know that I see it now. And I don't know what to do with that. She didn't sign her name. The reply came 3 days later. From Deborah, I don't need you to do anything with it. That was never the point. He didn't leave a storm. He left space. What you do with it is entirely yours. Sophia cried for the first time in weeks. Not because she wanted him back, but because he had already given her everything he had to offer and she had refused it while it still lived. Now, it only echoed. She returned to the bench in the park where they used to walk on Sundays, sat alone for an hour, no music, no phone, just air and trees and light. The world didn't stop. But for the first time in her life, it didn't rush. And she understood, suddenly, why John had always paused before he spoke. Because he didn't want to miss the part that came after the noise. She left the bouquet on the bench. Walked away without looking back. The next blog post appeared that weekend. Sunday. She left the flowers where he used to sit. I didn't touch them, they weren't mine to move. And that was it. The final act. Not a confrontation, not a climax. Just an acknowledgement. That some people only understand after the silence takes everything else away. Sophia stopped refreshing the page after that. The blog remained, but she no longer needed new entries. She had heard everything she'd once refused to listen to. And John? He was still gone. But she would carry the weight of that bouquet, forever. Not in her hands, but in the ache that comes from never hearing someone's final words, because you told them not to speak. It took Sophia 6 months to track Deborah down. Not because she was hiding. Deborah lived in plain sight, same apartment, same routine, same community cafe near the park where the old bench stood, but Sophia had waited. She wasn't sure what she wanted to say, or what she deserved to hear, but the ache wouldn't stop. Every week, the blog still posted, fewer words now, shorter lines, but each carried weight. Friday. He taught me that absence is sometimes the loudest answer. That line had haunted Sophia. So, she waited outside the cafe on a cold Monday morning, wrapped in a coat that still smelled faintly of that day, the wedding day she never finished. Deborah arrived precisely at 8:05 a.m., same grey scarf, same calm expression, same quiet grace that had once gone. Unnoticed, by everyone except John. Sophia stepped forward. Deborah. The other woman stopped, her eyes already knowing. Sophia hesitated. Can I talk to you? Deborah looked at her. There was no anger, no judgment, only patience, the kind John used to carry in his bones. Deborah nodded once and led her to a corner table. They sat. The silence stretched long between them, like a chasm made of unspoken history. Finally, Sophia broke it. Why did you do this? Her voice cracked, not with accusation, but confusion. Grief. Shame. Deborah looked at her quietly, stirred her tea, then said, You told him not to come. Sophia blinked. So I did, Deborah continued, for him. Sophia felt her breath lodge in her throat. But, why didn't you say anything? Deborah tilted her head. What was there to say? You could have told people the truth, that I didn't know he was sick, that I didn't mean. Deborah raised a hand gently, stopping her. This was never about what people think, it was about what you never saw, and what he never needed to explain. Sophia swallowed hard. I didn't know, she whispered. I know. But you let everyone believe I was. I let silence speak, Deborah replied. Sophia leaned forward, desperate now. I didn't hate him, I just didn't understand him. That, Deborah said softly, was always the problem. Sophia sat back. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Sophia said, You loved him. Deborah didn't deny it. I loved the way he waited before speaking, she said. I loved that he never tried to outshine anyone, that he remembered small things and didn't ask for credit. I loved that when he was in pain, he didn't make it your problem, but he made space for you anyway. Sophia's voice was brittle. I didn't know he was dying. He wasn't, Deborah said. Not then, but he was close, and he was alone, because you asked him to be. Sophia shook her head, eyes wet. I was scared, I know. I didn't think he'd ever leave. He didn't, Deborah said, her voice nearly a whisper. You just stopped noticing he was still there. Sophia looked down at her hands. There were no words left, no defense, no explanation that didn't sound like vanity, so instead, she asked, Why the blog? Deborah looked out the window. A couple passed by, laughing, hand in hand. Because I needed to remember him in a world that didn't, she said, and because I thought, maybe someday, you'd read it. I did, Sophia admitted. Deborah turned back to her. And what did you feel? Sophia opened her mouth, closed it, then finally said, Small. Deborah nodded. He never wanted you to feel that, she said, even when you hurt him. He told you that. He didn't have to. Sophia exhaled. I used to think he was weak. Deborah smiled faintly. And now? Sophia's voice cracked. Now I don't think I could survive being as strong as he was. They sat in silence again. Then Sophia said, Do you still talk to him? Deborah didn't answer for a long time. Then she said, No. Sophia froze. You mean he's? I mean, Deborah interrupted gently. He left. For real this time. Not with anger. Just gone. She paused. One day, he just stopped answering. The blog wasn't for him anymore. It was for me. And maybe, for you. Sophia's lips trembled. Do you know where he is? Deborah shook her head. He didn't leave a trail, just a note, one line. Sophia whispered, what did it say? Deborah looked her in the eye. Thank you for staying when I stopped asking. Sophia covered her mouth. Tears slipped down her cheeks without sound. Deborah slid a napkin across the table, not with pity, just presence. Sophia took it with shaking fingers. I wasn't a good person to him. Deborah said nothing. I ruined his faith in love. Still silence. I don't know how to fix that. Deborah looked at her, and in the softest voice said, some things aren't meant to be fixed, only understood. Sophia let out a sob, quiet, broken. He left me the bouquet. Deborah nodded. He did. I've been holding it ever since. I know. Why didn't you hate me? Deborah tilted her head. Because he didn't. Sophia looked up, startled. Deborah's voice was steady. He told me once, she hurt me, yes, but I loved her quietly, and I'd rather she remember the silence than forget the noise. Sophia blinked back fresh tears. How could he still care? Deborah smiled sadly. That's what made him different. They sat there a while longer. Eventually, Sophia asked, will you keep writing the blog? Deborah shrugged. Maybe. Will you ever write about this? Deborah finished her tea. I already did. Sophia froze. Deborah stood up, wrapped her scarf tighter, and said, go read Wednesday. Then she walked out the cafe door. Sophia sat there for a long time, staring at the empty chair across from her. Then she pulled out her phone, opened the blog, and scrolled. Wednesday. Sometimes the person who broke everything is also the only one brave enough to face the pieces. She came today, not for forgiveness, but for truth. And for once, I didn't write for him, I wrote for her. I hope she heard it. The building manager barely remembered his name. Kept to himself, she said, flipping through papers. Always paid on time, left no forwarding address. The apartment sat vacant for weeks. Not because of a haunting, but because there was nothing left to haunt. No pictures, no clothes, no traces of rage or loss. Just a folded blanket on the couch, a single pair of indoor slippers by the bed, and an unplugged coffee maker next to an empty cup. The kind of emptiness that didn't scream abandonment, just completion. Eventually, a quiet couple moved in. They never asked about the previous tenant. They repainted the walls, changed the fixtures, and brought in bright furniture, but they kept the bench on the small balcony. They said it felt like it belonged. Somewhere across the city, the blog continued. Deborah hadn't updated it in weeks, but the comment section lived. New entries appeared, not hers, others. For John, who never yelled, even when he was right. To the man who helped me carry my groceries in silence and nodded like we shared a secret. He wasn't loud, but he was there. Submissions poured in, short memories, quiet reflections, anonymous posts from strangers who remembered a moment, a kindness, a stillness. The blog stopped being about grief. It became a tribute, a community, a digital altar for someone who had walked away without needing to be heard. And Sophia? She moved to a smaller apartment, no fans, no press, no apology tour. Her name faded from headlines after Ryan's PR team scrubbed all trace of the wedding debacle. It had been messy, short-lived, and quickly buried by newer scandals. The world moved on. Sophia didn't. She lived alone. Still checked the blog on Sundays. Sometimes left a donation under anonymous. Never wrote a post, but once, just once, she submitted a line. I never heard his final words, but I hear his silence every time I try to speak. It was approved by Deborah, no edits, no note. She let it stand, and that was enough. Sophia started walking again, same park, same bench. She passed the place every weekend. Sometimes she'd sit, sometimes she wouldn't, but she always looked at it, like it owed her something she could never reclaim. One day, she saw a young man reading there, his hoodie pulled over his ears, a book in hand. She paused. He looked up and nodded politely. She nodded back, then kept walking. She didn't sit. She never sat anymore. The bench wasn't hers, it had never been. John's absence followed her, not like a ghost, but like a shadow she'd only now begun to understand, a quiet presence shaped by everything she hadn't said when she had the chance. She kept the wedding bouquet dried in a shadow box, never hung it, never displayed it, just kept it under her bed, like a confession pressed between glass. Years passed. Deborah published a collection of the blog posts, not for profit, just for record. It was titled, "She Told Him Not to Come, He Listened." Sophia bought a copy. She didn't ask for a signature. She didn't need one. The title was enough. It told the story she could never rewrite. Eventually, even the blog slowed. Less activity. Fewer comments, just the occasional post. But the archive remained, and with it, the image, a bouquet left behind, an aisle never walked, a man who never shouted, a silence that answered louder than any declaration. The final photo uploaded was taken by someone in the park, the bench, a single flower placed on it. No caption, no tags. It became the blog's banner, and that's how the story lived. Not in noise, not in confrontation, but in stillness. And in one final memory, Sophia never shared with anyone. She'd once tried to call his number again, just once, months after everything. The line didn't go dead, it rang, and rang, until it went to voicemail, no greeting, no name, just silence. She never tried again. She never told Deborah. She never told anyone. But that moment stayed with her longer than the wedding, the scandal, or the apology she never gave. Because sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't destruction, it's absence. It's living without the need to be remembered, and still being unforgettable. Sophia was no longer hated, or adored, or discussed. She had become forgettable. And John? He was everywhere in his absence. In the quiet pauses of others. In the gentle patience people began to offer again, in strangers choosing to walk away without explaining. He never returned, and no one ever confirmed where he went. But his silence became legacy, and Sophia? She watched the world forget her version. The one where she was the bride, the one where she had the perfect love, the one where she believed she held the power. Because in the end, John didn't ruin the wedding. He simply left. Quietly, gracefully. Without looking back. And she? She's the one still holding the bouquet. Long after the aisle cleared, long after the altar lights shut off. Still waiting for closure, that will never come.